I'm Heather.
And I'm Desiree.
And you're listening to
the Perpetually Overdue Podcast. Welcome to another week of the Perpetually Overdue Podcast. My name is Desiree.
And I'm Heather.
And today's topic is a fun one that I know Heather and I are very passionate about, being that it is something that's very much a part of who we are as creative people. So this week, we're talking about our writing journey, our routines, and our publication goals. So let's get into it. Heather, where to begin? The journey has been long for both of us. It has evolved throughout the decades, I could safely say, in some ways.
Yeah, I can give a Reader's Digest version of how it started if you want to start there.
Let's go there.
Okay, well, so I grew up writing mostly in school. I did win a couple of awards for some poetry and short stories that I did, including one that was called Jack the Dragon. I'll never forget. It was submitted into the fair, which you know about because we both grew up in Florida.
Oh, the fair.
Yes. Side note, totally found online the entire commercial for the fair.
Oh my gosh.
I saved it.
The fair.
The fair. The fair. Be there. The fair. That's literally all that it was. Yes. It's just saying over and over again, the fair be there.
Yes.
But mind you, this is not your typical county fair. This thing was massive. It was an amusement park in and of itself. I mean, the rides were amusement park level. Mm-hmm. I remember I took a picture with a seal once because they had animals, they had a circus, they had all sorts of things.
And it's like plopped in the middle of like residential area, not even like...
But it's a huge park.
Yes.
Like it's a huge public park area because it was so massive, you had to have a big open space for it. Mm-hmm. But they also would have like tents that you would walk through and you would see a bunch of stuff from schools in the county. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it would be art projects. Sometimes it would be like agricultural things, like what Future Farmers of America or something like that. They'd have animals. And sometimes it would be writing. So I had one of my poems submitted in the county fair and it won second place.
Nice.
I know. All the accolades. It's like a Pulitzer practically. No. So I always had a knack for writing, but I never actually thought when I was younger that I was going to grow up to be a writer. The first thing that I thought was I was going to be a pop star.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I had that one too.
Yep. I think in the days of Britney Spears and NSYNC and Christina Aguilera, we all aspired to be pop singers.
I actually went to an audition for a girl group.
That does not surprise me at all.
with a boot on my leg because I had tore my ligament.
You don't need to keep doing this because we can hear you. So obviously we both had different aspirations when we were a little bit younger. And then after the singing aspirations, which kind of went back and forth a little bit because it was like a pop singer. And then after that, it was acting. Then we were going to be in a band. Desiree and I actually were in a band. We both play guitar and we had a drummer and we were going to be like this 3-piece band. Mind you, we had no bass. Desiree and I did both sing and we were writing songs at the time. And I still have somewhere the lyrics. Mm-hmm. I hope I do because, when you move around a lot... Mm-hmm. And then there's a video of me playing the guitar for my nephews, singing one of the songs that we had created. Now, granted, at that time when we were in a band, we were also religious. So we were going to be a Christian band.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is so cringy now.
Especially because the name of the band.
I don't remember. What was our name?
You don't remember? It was your idea, too.
Was it I think no. We had to have collectively come up with it together.
I mean, but the double meaning of it was your idea. Morning comes. But morning, as in mourn.
Yeah. I actually like that name. Whatever.
No, it was, but still, it was so emo of us.
Oh, yeah. I mean... Any chance that we could use the word crimson in the lyrics, we took the opportunity. So, yeah, there were a lot of aspirations. Both did theater. Again, acting was an aspiration for a little while. All the while, we were readers.
Mm-hmm.
So for the both of us, getting into YA is what really sparked the whole, like, maybe writing is the way to
Novel
go.
writing for me.
Novel writing, yes. So I went to school. I went to Arizona State University, and I have a bachelor's in English. That is pretty much useless, but I have it. And I did a marketing internship. So I worked with an author that was published through Scholastic. She did middle grade books. So for like elementary, middle school kind of thing. She was published. She had quite a few books out by the time I was an intern for her. I got to do mostly PR stuff. That's why it was marketing. I would put PR packages together for people, especially when she was having a new book release. I got to go with her to this annual massive librarians conference that was in Austin, Texas. For people who are not traditionally published, you may not know this, but here's just a little tidbit. Librarians are your best friends for an author because you want them to carry your book and you want them to recommend your books. Even if it's not a sale, it is in a way because the library will have to purchase your books to put them in the libraries. And so this was a trip for her to promote her new book. I was there to pretty much assist her. I got to stay in my own little swanky hotel room. And I got to meet a bunch of people. There were a lot of authors there. It was really good exposure, really good experience. In addition to that, I was freelance writing. So I wrote for 2 online publications that no longer exist. Lucky me. So all of my portfolio for that just poof disappeared. Because when you write for online publications, if for any reason they go under, gone is your experience in a way. So it's always good to have a portfolio, to have those articles and things backed up. But I wrote for Skirt Collective and XO Jane, and both publications went under. Skirt Collective was a great publication. They were very nice to their writers. They weren't garnering enough revenue. XO Jane was a huge publication. They were horrible to their writers. They like to edit your work into a certain angle because they wanted to stir up emotion from readers. And so a lot of the times the writers would get attacked in the comment section, and it was a very toxic environment. And that's why that publication no longer exists. And that's a good thing. Obviously, if it's a toxic environment, you don't want that to continue on. And then I started working places like Upwork and Fiverr to do any sort of long form, short form article ghostwriting. I ghost wrote a bunch of fiction novellas for somebody, but mostly did like informational articles. I wrote a shit ton of articles for Easy Plant. If you've ever heard of that, it's like a self-watering pot, and they sell plants too. So I've done a bunch of that. The amount of topics that I've written on compound bows. I've even done white papers, which if you know anything about white papers, they're medical papers. And I was like, I don't feel qualified. But the good news is that they provide you the information. You just have to put it together in a cohesive way. And then I have my own writing. So I was working on a debut novel that, again, if you see the ADHD episode, you'll know I struggle with completion. So that is still being worked on. I have a short story, a horror story that this writing critique group that I was a part of was like, this is your genre. And I was like, great. I have 9 chapters of a science fiction novel, but apparently horror is my genre. So I don't know, like, am I supposed to pivot here? But that is pretty much my history with writing. I have, other than the freelance writing, I don't have any of my fiction work published yet. But yeah, that's my brief background. And I know you have your own that also involves acting, singing, and the whole 9.
So here's the thing that I'll touch when I go into my history, because a lot of back then, even if I was in pursuit of other fun means of career, would you say that your writing in various other formats spanned further back than when you went to college?
Yeah, I mean, different types of writing, because I forgot to mention this. Desiree and I tried to start a production company at one point.
Yeah, I forgot about that one. Now that name's more cringy.
Yes, it was called Lovesick Bride Films. Let's just pause for a moment.
Oh, especially because the memories and the images are flooding back very quickly.
Yes. So we did script writing. So we learned how to do, I mean, Desiree had already known how to do script writing for plays, And then we started dabbling in film script writing, which it looks a little bit different.
Mhm.
So I gained a lot of knowledge from that. I felt like script writing was pretty fun. Would you agree?
Mhm.
Like, it was fun. Now that we've actually had a hand in writing full length novels,
Mhm.
script writing is so much easier.
It is so much easier.
It's all the same elements, right?
Yes.
So you're still giving direction as far
Mhm.
as what you want the actors to do lightly. Obviously,
Yeah.
you don't want to be too detailed. You want to let them
Mhm.
do their thing. But it's mostly dialogue, it's stage direction,
Mhm.
or it's directions for the way that it's being filmed.
Mhm.
With writing novels, it's everything.
Yeah.
And it's so much more. I mean, I would say dialogue is probably like a third of
Mhm.
what you, unless it's dialogue heavy,
Yeah.
it's a third of what you write. Whereas
Mhm.
with a script, that's mostly what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. I mean, granted, you still have to think about story structure in the same way. You still need a
Yeah.
3-act structure to
Yeah,
have a
totally.
solid story. But yeah, you're basically mostly just writing dialogue and pretty much dialogue happening at this location. That's it. Move on.
Yeah. Because when we did Lovesick Bride films, our first film was going to be called Cellar.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also like a double meaning because it was going to be a short film on human trafficking. So it was going to be cellar as in a location, a basement type
Underground
area, underground area where the human trafficking victims were going to be kept, and then seller. You know what I mean? Like a play on words.
Yeah.
So I want to say that we had written either the whole thing or at least
We
like,
did.
Okay, yes.
We did because we were actually already planning production.
Yes. And then what was the program that we used that helped us to figure out script writing?
I never knew how to properly pronounce it. It was either Celtics or Celtics. It was like
that's
CELT and then X. It still exists, but now you
Yeah.
have to pay for it, whereas back then it was free.
Because it was like new.
Yeah, so it was fantastic. And it just
yeah.
it pretty much formatted everything for you. You just had to type in and fill in the blanks, basically.
Yeah. We even had a poster.
Yes.
Mocked up for this short film.
And we were not designers.
Yeah. Speaking of, I forgot to mention that this doesn't really have anything to do with writing, but as far as the acting goes, in addition to doing theater, I forgot I did a short film that was in the Kansas City Film Festival. I was the main character in it. I played a woman who had cancer and she was coming home to tell her husband, and they get into an argument about how to properly deal with her illness. He wanted to do one thing and she wanted to do another, and it just showed the cracks in their marriage and in their relationship. So I forgot because I didn't actually go to the premiere. I didn't go to, I would never want to watch myself. I just feel like I would just cringe so hard and think about all the things that I could have done differently, the choices that I could have made. No. So, but yeah, I forgot that I did that.
Oh,
crazy, right?
Yeah. Okay. So my history, I should have known I was a writer when in 5th grade, we were all in detention and there were 3 things we had to do for detention because long story short, we were a bunch of 5th graders who skipped school. But we did it as a group that was well known.
I remember that story. It's in another episode.
Yes.
Go and find it.
So being that like a well-known group of 5th graders suddenly didn't show up to school, yeah, we didn't really plan that out right. So detention, one of the things we had to do was write, I think it was like a 500-word essay. I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, this is cool. I wrote in my cursive and I wrote out my entire essay while everyone begrudgingly wrote theirs. I was like, oh, this is fun. Of course, I was not trying to show that because we were cool. Boo, we had to write an essay. Inside, I was giddy as fuck. And so my essay, my right penmanship was so pretty and everything. Should have been a sign early on. Yeah. But
you do have really good, she does have really good penmanship, guys. I've seen it. I've been envious of it.
And so growing up, what slowly I think started for me, it began with poetry. And I was very much to the point that there was a program back then when the internet was like first on the scene. There was a poetry.com.
Aging yourself.
I know. There was like a poetry.com or something. And it was a place that anyone can post.
Oh, yes.
Anyone can post a poem.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, all of your poems were always chosen to be printed on their official poetry book.
I
If
remember
you
that.
just pay to get a copy of it, they'll send it to you.
Yes, I did that too.
Yep. So I wrote so many poems into that freaking site. It was hilarious. So poetry was what started it. And then when the Britney Spears pop star dreams came into play, at the time, my best friend in like ninth grade, she wanted to see how we can write a song. And she had written a poem. And I was like, wait, I think we can translate a poem into an actual song. So I spent that afternoon taking parts that felt like could make a good chorus so that it can repeat. And that was like the birth of writing music for me. And so I started changing poetry into songs a lot during that period, especially because I went to go audition for girl groups and everything, thinking it would be my big chance. And so
how many girl groups did you audition for?
I only made it to two auditions, two separate auditions. Because, like I said, I had the bum foot. I got there late because my mom was the one driving. They were at the point where they were teaching the choreography to audition. So I was already trying to catch up, but I barely caught, and with a bum leg. And,
yeah, that's not going to work.
But I was determined. This was my big chance. And then the other one was me and my best friend at the time. We went to audition and had to go on stage. And this was a bigger room. This was way more intimidating. We thought we could audition together. So we had already planned and choreographed something. And they're like, no, it's an individual. You can only, and we were like, what do we do?
Oh, shit.
So we had to, it was a whole thing. But anyway, after that was when I started theater. And then suddenly I had an assignment where I had to try to write a play. And then when that came easily, and mine was one of the 4 chosen to be actually made into a production for the class, I suddenly got that hunger to go, So there were many times in life where the central theme was just writing. Writing was my passion, but I didn't put that together for a long time. And so I was always pursuing something else.
Well, because you're a performer too. So
yes.
I don't think you have to necessarily choose at the end of the day, but I do think that when you get to a certain point in life, like just age wise, you start to settle into more, okay, realistically, do I really want to pursue? I kind of like the behind the scenes aspect of being a writer. Even if you become famous, you're never going to deal with the scrutiny or the invasion of privacy as you would if you were acting or if you were singing. Granted, you have to reach a certain level of fame for even that to happen to you, but So but let me ask you, you also wrote all of the stuff that we did within the drama ministry too, right?
Yes, I wrote 99% of it. There were a couple of times here and there where I had a friend at the time who wrote a couple plays, but basically I wrote
majority of them. Yeah. And you had another co-leader within that ministry. Did he ever write any of the plays as well?
He didn't, but he was my sounding board. So he was more like that supportive kind of like help me work through ideas and thoughts. But I was the one who did the writing. And
go figure.
So eventually from playwriting, we went to script writing because of what you already described. And as you said, I had already actually, that's funny. I forgot about that. Yeah, it had started as a hobby. When I finally got a computer in my room, I was just writing random movie scripts and they were all cheesy rom-coms. And we would sit together and basically read them and we would each alternate dialogue, whoever's part. And we would spend we would spend a whole afternoon just reading through my scripts, and you would play one part, I would play another part, reading off. And nothing ever came of those, obviously. And honestly, at that time, I don't think I ever expected anything to come up, but it was fun. It was fun, but it was also, there was something more to it. There was this kind of serenity escape for me. Like I really felt at peace being able to turn the world off, sit in front of that computer, and for hours I would write out these screenplays. I would almost finish them. It brought me so much joy. Eventually, life happens and you're trying to figure shit out. But I always found myself coming back to variations of writing, whether it came back to writing music again or writing poetries again, or any way I could find my way to writing. I didn't realize kept being my happy place. And it wasn't
Yeah.
until later on when we'll get into like what current projects and stuff. But then it was reading YA, as you mentioned, that suddenly I thought, can I write novels? Because again, the idea of like you can only be an English major to write a novel kind of mentality.
Yeah. Well, and then we had also really fallen in love with classic literature like Jane Austen and the
Try
Bronte
writing.
sisters and
Yep.
Dickinson and stuff. And so when you compare yourself to that, I mean, like my favorite book is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I will never be able to write, and that is a product of its time. So yeah, when you're comparing yourself to those kinds of novels, then it can be very daunting. YA felt way less intimidating.
Yes, especially because I forgot about this. Before starting to write a YA novel, I did by hand start trying to write a little historical fiction romance novel.
Yes, I forgot about that.
Yes. And so it was definitely not easy. So even more so, I was like, I probably can't do this. But then YA happened and I
Yeah.
was so inspired. And I
Mhm.
fell in love with the dystopian genre so
Yeah.
much. And I just decided to try one day. And next thing I knew, a few months later, I had a full length novel done, my first one ever. That
Mhm.
changed everything from there on for me.
Yeah, it's crazy. And even with that, because you have since sort of changed genre, you still like suspense and there to be more of a storyline, but you went from like dystopian to romance and fell in love with romance genre as well. And for many different reasons, some of which you talk about in other episodes of like how it made you more in tune with yourself, your body, your sexuality, freed you in a lot of ways. And who doesn't love a good love story? Who doesn't love the little butterflies and the tingly feelings that we get?
And I've always been a romantic at heart, like really,
Oh,
like
yeah.
big time. And
Yeah.
so honestly, I always gravitated towards romance. If anything, I loved dystopian, but it was the romance in the dystopian that had me hooked. So
Exactly.
it was a matter of, yeah, I like this genre, but where can I fit in the romance? So
Yeah, it's honing in onto what it is that you really actually like about that genre. Because even though you enjoy the dystopian part of it, if you take out the romance
I
and
was
you
like,
just leave the dystopian, yeah, it doesn't do it
for
quite the
me.
same for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Awesome. It's interesting the many different types of writing that we've done over the years: script writing, playwriting, songwriting, poetry. I think everybody starts off in poetry, let's be
I believe,
honest.
yes.
Poetry, it's the least intimidating form of writing, although I would say it's some of the most challenging as well, because
Yes.
if you're wanting to actually get it published somewhere, you can't just, slap some rhymes at the end of stanzas and then be like, here it is. Give me my prize. So you have actually completed an entire full length novel. Actually, you're in the process of editing it down because you went over the word count of what you need to for that particular genre.
For traditional publishing, because
Yes.
one of my frustrations is that to play the traditional publishing house games is not always what is in the market and what the people want, because majority of all of my favorite romantic suspense authors who are big and selling do not write 90,000 word romantic suspense novels. Those are really short. I've been reading them for years, and I understood once I wrote this novel specifically how not only do you need to fully develop a romance, you need to fully develop the plot of the suspense element too.
Yeah.
And that requires time and proper build up. Though of course it can be done at 90K. It's why authors right now who write in that genre and have written in that genre are always over 110, 120K on their novels. So I guess subconsciously my story felt, right. I reread it. I had another critique partner read it. And at the moment, I have two more people reading it specifically to see what can you suggest to take out. Because as of right now, everyone else who has read it are like, no, it's great how it is. I'm like, great, but I can't traditionally query it because they won't even look at it if it's not between 90 pushing 100K max.
Yeah. I actually took a course within my degree on how to query your work. And it's true, it's very specific. And it's different for every publishing company. They have their own criteria, and they will not even look at your work if you dare fuck up any of the criteria that they're wanting. So some of them want you to provide the full work. Some of them only want like the first 5 pages of it. It's all very, very specific.
Yep.
And if you're fortunate enough to get a literary agent, then you'll have help in being able to query your work properly. If not, you're going to be licking envelopes and printing out copies and, you know, making sure that it's...
You can't send it
that's
to an editor now without a literary agent.
This is an old way of doing things.
If you don't have a literary agency, you have no access to editors from a publishing house. So you have to win first a literary agent and hope they can sell the shit out of your book to the right publishing houses.
And this is traditional publishing. There are plenty of people that publish non-traditionally, like on platforms like Amazon or Wattpad. And there are so many platforms where you can put out your work. Granted, things like Wattpad are going to be very specific to like fanfic and romance. Those are the genres that I think are the biggest on those types of platforms. But they're a means to an end, because a lot of people that put their work on Wattpad that get popular get literary agents.
So
there you go.
I want to ask you.
Yes.
Throughout all the years that you have dabbled with writing, have you toyed with different genres, or have you always stuck to, well, now 2, but one of the 2 genres?
Like you, I was really attracted to YA, dystopian YA specifically. A lot of the stories that would come to mind would be sort of post-apocalyptic. And at that time, that's really what you saw. You had Divergent, you had Hunger Games, you had Maze Runner. All of these were very dystopian type of novels. I think that the dystopian genre is still very alive and well, but it's not what it was back then. I feel like that was the heyday of dystopian. So when I started to write, because I had, again, my ADHD, I have many started but unfinished story ideas. I have entire world building pages written down of stuff that never came into fruition. One of my novel ideas was about a disease that completely just decimated the world, which is really weird because this is pre-pandemic. This is before, way before COVID. And people were pretty much trying to figure out how to exist in the world after so much of the population was taken. My main heroine, her sibling got taken. But there was almost a supernatural element to it, in that with her particular sibling, and again, this is an underdeveloped story, so there could have been more people, the illness affected her differently and it changed her. And so she became an asset to the government and all of this stuff. So that was very dystopian. And the one that I have given the most time to and have developed the most is actually science fiction. It's new adult science fiction because there's more adult themes in this book. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for YA. And it's not just because there's some smexiness to it. It's more so, it touches on a lot of different, very difficult, like racism, discrimination, violence against women, like sexual assault, things like that. So it has more adult themes in it. I would not recommend it to be YA. And then the ages of the characters, they're a little bit older as well. So that also determines where it fits into the genre. The only other genre that I've dabbled in is horror. And like I said earlier, funny enough, my writing critique group that I was a part of here in Colorado, they were like, this is your genre. And I was like, no, this was supposed to be for fun. I like fantasy. I want to write a story about a fantasy world or science fiction or something. I don't want to do horror, even though that's what I read a lot.
Yeah.
And because I was reading a lot of horror, I was like, let me just see what happens. But like romance, horror is really stigmatized as well. and it's not seen as serious writing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's difficult. This particular short story had a lot to do with my religious background.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's partially what made it really good. You read some of it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can definitely share your opinion on it. But I think one of the things that you said also that made it fitting for that genre is the imagery that I use.
Mm-hmm.
Within the story to create the uncomfortable, sort of sinister horror elements. That is a lot of fun, and it's very bending. It definitely exercises other muscles for your writing, which I'm sure you can relate to, because with romance, there's so many subgenres of romance. I've read a lot of Desiree's work over the years. She had a dystopian novel at one point that you had done quite a bit on.
I still have it, yeah.
Arcadia. I don't know if that's what it was called.
Oh, that one. I was thinking of the other one. Yes.
Okay, so multiple.
Yeah.
And they were YA dystopian, but then you get into the romance, and then the romance suspense. How is that morphed your writing in a way?
So it was interesting because, yes, very much when I first started, it was very just cheesy rom-coms. And then when I discovered dystopian and was trying to write a romance within that, it was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it because I guess in part, the fun thing is it forces the romance to accelerate because of the circumstances, which is a lot of fun to write, because then obviously it requires to put the romance front and center more in the midst of everything happening. And so it was definitely challenging to explore dystopian and trying to think of my own idea and my own world, and world building like that for the first time was really interesting and went through a lot of trial and error during that time. So I wrote another one like it, and that one actually stretched me more because I went a little darker on that one. And so that was very interesting, and it was coming very naturally. It was a lot of fun. Then I didn't touch novels for a little bit, and when I came back, when I started transitioning and going, am I capable of writing adult?
Yeah, because YA is very PG when it comes to the romance. It's like foreplay. But you don't actually get into the sexy.
Exactly. And so this was a few years later, my reading changed, my reading preferences. I stopped reading as much YA, and I slowly started reading more new adult. And then from new adult, I expanded to adult. And so I wanted to play with writing a romantic comedy. And I still have it. I actually reread it because I sent it to my co-writer right now.
Yeah.
For an idea for a collab we're doing later this year. So that required me to now think of not these fantastical elements and think of how to write just real everyday life scenarios. It almost seemed easier to write a novel about fun, crazy, fantastical situations as a plot. But when it comes to just real life, it was like, what's the plot?
Yeah, like how do you make it interesting? Because real life tends to be mundane.
Exactly. So that was a lot of fun. And then eventually I tried to stick with romantic comedy, then just contemporary romance. And then it wasn't until a few years ago that I was reading a lot of romantic suspense. And I feel like that slotted into place the dystopian post-apocalyptic love that I found in YA, but now it brought both worlds together. It brought my love for romance and then adult romance, but then also the fun, scary, crazy elements of suspense. And that's where I slotted in and felt like, ooh, this is where I really feel comfy.
It's crazy how, because for the both of us, I feel like this is true. It's crazy how much what you read informs how you write and what you write.
Yep.
Especially if it's something that you really fall in love with and gravitate towards, then you all of a sudden are like, can I? But you also went back to the dark side for the short story that you had published in that anthology.
Yes. So I had an opportunity. I was approached 2 years ago by a new Canadian press, and they were reaching out to author tubers, which is just a brand in YouTube where writers and authors kind of build community, do things together, and so they're known as author tubers. They reached out to a few author tubers to see if they would be interested in submitting a piece, and if it gets accepted, it would be published in a collection. This felt out of left field. And honestly, I almost didn't do it because specifically they wanted the theme to be dark. The word Stygian, it talks about like the dark nature of humanity. And so they
Yeah.
wanted us to all explore in whatever way we wanted to darkness in some
Mm-hmm.
way. And so I was like, I hadn't written in that genre in so long. So I was like,
Yeah.
can I even go back there? Do I know how? And
She did. Spoiler alert. She did.
so the max word count was 5K, the max. And I also had never written that short. I was like, I don't even know if I can do this. So before I even responded, I was like, let me try. And
Yeah.
so I had an idea out of nowhere and I just started typing. Literally the next day I finished it. And so I sent it to a couple people. Heather was one of them. And I was
Yeah.
like, does this even sound like, what do you think? I don't know. And
It was intense from the get-go. It
yeah.
was, I mean, the world that you created was very dark and very sinister.
And you don't have a lot of time to present all these things. So you do have to kind of jump in immediately to keep
Mm-hmm.
the reader interested. So I got good feedback and I reached out and said, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm interested. We went back and forth. They had their editor, once you got accepted, go through it. We were all going through the process. And eventually, later that year, it was officially published. Um, I know. And so it was wild because I think still till this day, 2 years later, it doesn't factor in my brain that I
That you
actually
published something.
at
Yeah.
all. I don't know why. I mean, it's literally for those who are on YouTube, it's right there. That is the collection. My story is in there. It's really bizarre because it still doesn't feel real.
Yeah, I can understand that, especially because I think we all have this fantasy of writing a novel that gets traditionally published and then seeing a dramatic shift in our lives where
Mm-hmm.
now this is our full time profession. We're not doing anything else. We're not having to struggle financially. We actually get to go into a bookstore and see our book
Mm-hmm.
on a shelf, which is, I think, a defining moment for any writer.
Yeah.
So there is still sort of that fantasy that I think it won't necessarily feel real until
Mm.
something like that happens. And even
Mm-hmm.
then, who knows? You might not
Yeah.
still feel it. You might still be like, this is not mine. This is somebody else's.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk a little bit about our goals now. We both
Mm-hmm.
have the goal to be traditionally published, to get a
Mm-hmm.
writing contract, and to write in our specific genres. So, working towards that, the hard part is just getting the fucking story out and
Mm-hmm.
getting it in a place to be able to query it. So, for me, it's I
Mm-hmm.
have not finished my debut novel. For you, it's trying to get it edited to a point where you can query it.
Yes.
And then comes the work of actually trying to find a literary agent,
Mm-hmm.
probably hearing a lot of no's, looking for
Mm-hmm.
that one yes.
Yep.
I may have said this in a different episode, but I'll reiterate it because I felt it was very inspiring for me, and I know it'll be very inspiring for a lot of up and coming writers.
Mm.
But the writer that I worked with at Scholastic, when she wrote her first novel, she heard no from every publishing company that she sent it to. She was very smart about it. She did not just immediately throw in the towel. She wrote every single one of those publishing companies back and said, what can I do to make it better? In other words, what can I do to make it more enticing to you to want to
Mm-hmm.
publish? And only a couple of them wrote her back. Scholastic was one of them, which, I mean, everybody knows Scholastic.
Mm-hmm.
So to have such a huge publishing company write you back and take the time to tell you, this is what I think that you can do to improve it. She took all their notes. She did exactly what she was told. And then before she did that, she approached them and responded and said, if I take what you have told me and I change this story, will you take a look at it again?
Mm.
They said yes, and so she did exactly that, and then she got a publishing contract with Scholastic. So all that to say, she got nothing but no's in the beginning. She did not give up. She believed in her work. She believed in the story, and it became very popular. So much so that she got approached by Disney to write the book companion to the movie Coco.
Wow.
So the book version of Coco is written by that author.
That's
She also
awesome.
did a book version of Encanto too.
Wow.
So you just never know.
Never
If
know.
she had just given up after hearing
Mm-hmm.
no that first time, she wouldn't have gotten any of those opportunities. And now she's a full-time
Mm-hmm.
author. It's what she does for a living. So,
And I will say, obviously, thankfully, because of, technology and
mm-hmm.
different things now, we don't have to accept one option. Because, like Heather said in the beginning, there's self publishing and indie
Yeah.
publishing. Those are options. And you know what? Sometimes, depending on the genre, it's actually the better option than
Mm,
traditionally publishing. For example, I have a co writer and we write under a pen name and we write shorter romances. Those shorter romances, very much the market is for Amazon. It's much better to do it self published because the schedule that people and readers are used to when it comes to these shorter romances is far quicker than what you're going to get with traditional publishing, which
right.
usually is about a year's wait to wait for a new publication to come out of your book. And
Mm-hmm.
so these have become very popular. There are indie authors who are making great money. I mean, they're surpassing so many traditional authors in what they make even these days, and their money is more consistent. Their income is more consistent than what they see with traditional publishing. So at the end of the day, it's also figuring out what avenue is going to be best for you and for your
Mm-hmm.
book and for your readers. So thankfully now we have those options. I do both. I am self published on Amazon through a pen name. I have the Canadian publication of my short dark dystopian story. They're traditionally published. And then I hope to, under my name, traditionally publish my romantic suspense series
Mm-hmm.
that I also am working on right now, in addition to the one I'm editing.
Yeah.
So I'm giving myself this one opportunity to see if I get traditionally published. But I have learned that after self publishing for the last couple years, if that avenue doesn't happen for me, I
Yeah.
know I have another avenue
Yeah,
because I will
totally.
always be a writer and I'm going to want to share these stories.
Yeah.
So,
And I think there's a stigma to self publishing
yeah.
because it's not on a shelf in a bookstore that you can go and you can make that purchase. And
Well, it is now. It can be,
it
but
can be,
yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
but through Amazon. But I mean, like going into any bookstore and being
Mm-hmm.
able to
Mm-hmm.
see your book on their shelves,
Yeah.
having them do traditional in-store signings, like
Mm-hmm.
doing all the traditional stuff that you do with publishing,
Book tours and stuff.
book
Yeah.
tours and things like that. I think again, it's the stigma of, because anybody can self-publish,
And they
it's
have.
hard to yes, it's hard to differentiate yourself
Yeah.
within that because there's an
Yeah.
oversaturation
The
of,
market's very oversaturated.
yes. So there is that. And then even with traditional publishing, it's kind of not what it used to be,
At all.
because now you're seeing more and more stories from people that are not actually writers, but because they have a really large platform on
Yes.
social media, all of a sudden they become writers and they just
Mm-hmm.
throw out a random book. And,
Yeah.
and that's good for them because nobody says that you have to be tied to one specific art form. You can do
Mm-mm.
whatever you want. But I think it's also kind of shitty that unless you have a large platform, sometimes they won't even consider you because they
Mm-hmm.
want that built-in audience that you have. And it takes a lot of work to get that going. And sometimes the way that you do it has absolutely nothing to do with writing. It's
And it's
just,
time consuming.
it
That's the
is.
thing. And I mean, as it is, even established authors right now, I know one YA author that she's pretty big and she's one of the main five publishing houses, or is it four now? Because two converged. She just complained on social media through a fun reel about how she's just trying to finish her book, but the pressure to
Mm-hmm.
make content and be popular on social media is on top of her overwriting her book from the publishing house.
And it used to be that writers were just like in their little hovel,
Mm-hmm.
writing. There was mystery surrounding them. You didn't know what they were doing on a daily basis. They didn't have to be a personality or celebrity or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. But it kind of is just the way that it goes because even within Hollywood, I think about how actors used to be and how they used to have more of a private life and how now it's just like everything is out there in the
Mm-hmm.
public. And then with social media, everybody wants to know what they're doing every moment of every
Mm-hmm.
day. And in addition to running a business or being a
Mm-hmm.
singer or doing movies, you also have to be a personality on social
Mm-hmm.
media up until a certain point, because
Yeah.
some celebrities, they are famous enough, they barely have to post anything and they're doing just fine because their talent speaks for them. They don't have to
Mm-hmm.
be this alter ego on social media, but there's pressure there. There's
Yes.
definite pressure to be popular on social media so that you can have built-in readers.
Imagine you're asking a bunch of mostly introverted writers, like you said, who
Yeah.
normally would have just been happy to live a life in that little hovel. And
Yes.
now you're telling these introverts, be extroverted on social media online. And they're like, what? No, I just want to write in my hole. Leave me alone.
Not to mention that a lot of people don't necessarily match up with the stories that they write, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So they're writing these intense, dark romances or something like that, and then you see a picture of them and they look like a trad wife almost. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? You're like, not what I would have pictured.
And that's another thing. Some of them are like kindergarten teachers and they don't want to be known because they're like, this is a separate part of my life that I
Yeah.
don't want infiltrating. I don't need the kids I teach parents coming to me being like, I just read this dark, spanking romance that you wrote.
This alien tentacle smacks the erotica.
But
You're
thanks
like,
for
oh
teaching
shit.
my kid.
Yeah, exactly. It almost feels like if you're gonna go the route of being a personality on social media, like that needs to be your second job. Your
Hmm.
writer, personality, or influencer on social media. No kindergarten teacher. No, I own my. I mean, I guess you could do something like owning a coffee shop or something like that, but it does get difficult depending on the career that you are in, and
Hmm.
also like your own preferences and personality. Like, not
Hmm.
everybody, shocker, not everybody wants to be famous.
What?
I know. It's crazy to think that there are actually people out there who want to live a normal life and they don't want to be a celebrity and be hounded all the time. But some people do. Some people covet that, and that's okay too. So it just, it's a matter of preference. Some people love being on social media. They love interacting with people. They love being an influencer, a personality that people
Hmm.
get to see all the time. They don't mind sharing their lives. And then others are like, hell to the no. I want my privacy. I don't want to do any of that. So I guess it's just what your preference is. I feel
Mm.
like with what you said earlier about how self-publishing authors are making just as much, if not more money than traditionally published writers, now there's really no need to go
Mm.
the traditional route, especially if you're not really wanting to be a personality on social media, if you're
Mm.
not wanting to have your face plastered everywhere or try to gain followers, because you can keep your privacy and
Mm-hmm.
have your money, the best of
Mm-hmm.
both worlds. But I think with anything, whether you're traditionally published or whether you're self published,
Mm-hmm.
the only way to get to that comfy position is to do work that enough people like, that you gain that popularity,
Yep.
that audience. And I think it's difficult to do that no matter whether you're doing it
Mm-hmm.
traditionally or whether you're doing it self-published. I think the assumption is that if you are good enough to get a literary agent and you're good enough that a publishing company puts your book out there, then
Mm.
you're automatically set for life, and that's
Yep.
not the case.
Nope. You're only set for that book contract. You better sell them another one they'll like, especially if it's on an individual basis. It's not a series situation. And then at
Mhm.
the end of the day, a lot of these traditionally published authors, some of them no one has heard of, but we
No.
assume they're the caliber because they got traditionally published. I even know one who she got traditionally published by HarperCollins. It was a huge deal, like 7 years ago. And that was the last book that they bought from her. And now she's
Mm.
traveling and doing other things with, her husband. And it makes me wonder, like, what that must feel like. You had that moment where, like, one of the big five bought your book. You thought this was it. And
Yeah.
then that was it. That was your moment. And, they moved on.
Whatever happened to that book that did get published? Did it do well?
When it first came out, but then it fizzled.
Yeah. I think it's hard too. It's a very competitive field, and
It was back then too. It was the dystopian time.
yeah, and so you really have to be able to compete. And some people, I don't know, I think it takes a it's weird to say, but a special kind of spirit to do that without it feeling soul crushing. Because sometimes being in a competitive field, not everybody wants to compete. Not everybody wants to change themselves or morph into something in order to set themselves apart from other people. They're just kind of like, shouldn't my talent be enough? Shouldn't my story be enough? Why do I also have to be this, this, and this at the same time? It's something that I struggle with as a writer. I'm like, I have 300 followers on Instagram. I'm not popular. And I don't ever think I will be popular. And so if a literary agent or a publishing company is looking at my Instagram and they're looking at my followers, good luck to me, because that's not going to be a selling point for me. Nor do I want to have to try to conjure that up or purchase it, because let's be honest, some people purchase their followers, but it's not something that I really aspire to. If it happens organically, I'm like, great, you know, but it's not something that I'm going to literally bend over backwards for. So,
because it's a full-time job in and of itself, honestly.
It is.
And so the thing is, if you're also pursuing your writing, and as most people do, that's not their full-time job. They have a full-time job so they can eat and have a roof over their head.
Exactly.
So they're needing to carve out time to write and pursue that alone. And then in addition to that, you want them to also have a full-time social media managing career. It's too much.
And I think partly it's because of the fact that publishing companies don't want to do the job of promoting your work anymore. They want you to be able to do it. And so if you have a large platform, then it's a no-brainer. You just tell your audience about your book, and because they already follow you and like you, they're going to go out and instant sales. And so it's not always like that. There are plenty of authors that get published that don't have large platforms on social media. Course, thank goodness, because we'd be screwed. But at the same time, I do think that, this is going to be a little controversial to say, I think that sometimes people with large audience can get away with crappier stories. Because they have that built-in audience. I think that if you don't have that built-in audience, you better have one hell of a story, which I personally would rather.
I will say, interestingly enough, I think it's also the factor that it's like their story actually could be even equal to yours, but you won't get the chance and the opportunity to make it to where they want it because you don't have their backing. So in other words, the person with the audience, they are instantly bumped up before you, even though the stories are the same caliber, because of the audience. Whereas you, they're like, no, you need to work on making the story better. But it was the same caliber as so-and-so's, but they had the popularity and the numbers to get instant sales. So it's almost like they do get passes that we wouldn't without the audience.
Yeah, and granted, I'm not in the publishing world. I dabbled into it a little bit with my internship, but it's not necessarily something that I know extensively. But I do know the stories that I've read from certain people like that and been like, oh, this is just okay.
And let's not get started on what has happened to editing.
Which we talked about in our pet peeves episode, so please go and watch that. And granted, we barely scratched the surface even with this topic.
Yeah,
we didn't really get to talk about our process, but we can do another part of this where we do get to talk about our process a little bit more as far as how we write, what we need. Because it's like, it's a whole environment thing for me. If I'm going to write and I'm going to actually be productive, especially with my ADHD, I need like body doubling. I need the right atmosphere. I need a hot mug of tea or coffee to keep me going. I need complete silence. Don't anybody distract me. Not even a fucking pin drop, or I'm going to be like, oh, what's happening on Instagram? An hour later, still. Yeah, it's a whole thing. So we should definitely get into that.
Okay.
So as always, we want to start a conversation, especially surrounding this topic. If you are a writer, even if you're not a writer, but it's a world that you find intriguing, we would love to hear from you. What is your process? How did you get started in writing? What are you currently working on? Are you wanting to be self-published or are you wanting to be traditionally published? These are all questions that you can answer in the comments section of our YouTube video, Threads, Instagram, TikTok. We do have quite a bit of engagement on TikTok, a lot of conversations and comments on things that we've said in our podcast, and it's always fun. And we always respond.
Yes.
It's all, one of us will always, mostly me, I'll be honest, because I do the social media for the podcast, but Desiree will chime in if it's something that she's passionate about. She'll have her moment in the sun as well. But just so you know, we're always reading them, we're always liking them, we're always responding to them, because we do genuinely want to have community with our listeners. If you have any suggestions for us when it comes to focus, when it comes to our little ADHD problem and writing, I know body doubling was something that my therapist told me about, and it has been a game changer.
Huge, yes.
You were doing like Pomodoro sessions on Twitch, which was also super helpful, but then once the dialogue started happening, once people started chit-chatting in the chat, it was like all productivity went out the window.
But I recently changed it. So it's been really good.
So I mean, we don't really use this podcast to plug any of our projects, but if you're ever interested in having a productive writing session, Desiree does do Twitch sessions where she will write and make sure that everything is focused.
Yes.
You get your little breaks. It's basically a typical Pomodoro session that she does over there. There is the anthology that Desiree wrote, which we will put in the description on the podcasting platforms. And also on our YouTube description if you're interested in getting a copy. And we'll keep you guys posted. Yes. You never know what could happen.
You never know. So be sure, friends, that if you are watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, you like, you comment, you do all those wonderful things. Also, make sure you are following us on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. And while you're there, if you can leave us a review, that would be fantastic, because that definitely helps the algorithm push us forward towards other people who would also like this content, so we can all make new friends together. This was a lot of fun, as always. We probably will have to do a part 2 to this for sure.
Yes. Oh, and I forgot, Desiree on Amazon.
Oh,
if you're interested in reading Desiree's romance work with her writing partner, it's under the pen name Desiree, which will also be in the description box.
Perfect. Thanks, friend. All right, friends. Until next week, we'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.